My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 29 years old, and exactly 48 hours after my father demanded I fund his $8,470 luxury cruise to the Bahamas, he was sitting in my downtown office discovering that his disappointing retail clerk daughter was actually the CEO of a company worth $12.3 million. The look on his face when my so-called assistant stood up and introduced herself as my chief financial officer is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Come on, Vicky," he'd said during that phone call, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's just $8,000. You can spare it from your little paycheck, can't you? Your mother and I deserve a real vacation after everything we've done for you." I'd been standing in the break room of the boutique clothing store where I supposedly worked, stirring my coffee slowly while he continued his pitch. $8,470. For a 10-day cruise he'd already booked without asking me first. "Dad, I can't just—" "Can't or won't," he interrupted sharply. "You know what? Forget it. I should have known better than to ask you for help. You were always the selfish one." Then he laughed, not a warm chuckle, but a bitter, dismissive bark that made my hands shake. It was the sound of complete contempt wrapped in condescension, the audible manifestation of everything he'd ever thought about my choices in my life. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone with that cruel laughter still echoing in my ears. That same night, I received a group text from my mother. "Your father is very hurt by your refusal. Family is supposed to support each other. We raised you better than this." My older brother Trevor chimed in within minutes. "Seriously, Vic? They just want one nice trip. Stop being so tight with money." By morning, there were 17 text messages waiting, each more accusatory than the last. What none of them knew, what I'd carefully hidden for 3 years, was that I hadn't worked retail in a very long time. Before I explain what happened when they finally discovered the truth, let me know where you're viewing from and hit subscribe if you've ever been completely underestimated by your own family. To really understand why I'd kept my success hidden from my parents and brother, you'd have to go back 7 years to when I first started showing interest in fashion and business. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree, and I'd taken a job at Meridian Boutique in Boston because I wanted to understand retail from the ground up. My father, Douglas Hayes, had been a middle manager at an insurance company his entire career. Steady, predictable, completely risk-averse. He viewed entrepreneurship the way some people view skydiving, unnecessarily dangerous and slightly stupid. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time as a dental receptionist and spent the rest of her time managing the household, which mostly meant online shopping and lunch dates with her sister. Trevor, my brother who was 3 years older, had followed Dad into insurance and was considered the family's success story. He had a decent salary, a house in the suburbs, and a wife named Amanda who worked as a paralegal. Every family dinner became a celebration of Trevor's achievements while my retail job was treated like a temporary embarrassment. "Still folding sweaters?" Dad would ask with that particular smile that wasn't really a smile. "When are you going to get a real career, Victoria?" I tried explaining once, during a Christmas dinner when I was 23, that I was learning the business, understanding customer psychology, studying inventory management, building relationships with designers. "That's called making excuses for not having ambition," Dad said, cutting into his ham. Trevor was already on the management track by your age. What hurt most wasn't their lack of faith in my path. It was how they'd already written the story of my life and refused to consider any other narrative. I was the disappointing daughter, the one who didn't live up to potential, the cautionary tale they'd tell at family gatherings. But something else was happening during those years that they never bothered to ask about. I'd started designing clothes in my spare time, creating pieces that merged what customers actually wanted with elevated, sustainable materials. I'd met Christina Park, a brilliant fashion designer, at a local networking event. We'd bonded over shared frustrations with fast fashion. By the time I was 24, Christina and I had started selling custom pieces online through a small Shopify store we called Meridian Collective. We worked 70-hour weeks, Christina designing and me handling business operations. My parents thought I was just working retail and coming home tired. The financial requests started that same year. Dad's car needed expensive repairs. "Can you help us out with $1,500? We'll pay you back next month." I sent the money from my business account, not my retail paycheck. Next month never came, and neither did the repayment. Then Mom needed help with dental work, not covered by insurance. Just $3,000, honey. It's an emergency. I paid it, keeping careful records in a spreadsheet titled Family Loans with dates, amounts, and original promises. Trevor needed help with his house down payment. Just between us, the 10 grand would really make the difference. I was 25 years old, running a rapidly growing online fashion business while supposedly earning $12 an hour, and my family was draining my accounts without ever asking where the money actually came from. They simply assumed I was scraping together funds for them because that's what disappointing daughters do. They sacrifice quietly. My best friend Rachel saw through it during one of our weekly coffee dates. "They think you work retail," she said, stirring her latte slowly, "but you just paid your brother's down payment. The math doesn't math, Victoria." "I know," I admitted quietly. "So why not tell them the truth?" I'd thought about that question for a long time. Because the moment I tell them, every achievement becomes theirs to claim or diminish. Dad will say I got lucky. Trevor will find ways to undermine it. Right now, my success is mine. It's the one thing they can't touch or taint. Rachel nodded slowly, understanding. "Just promise me you're not doing this forever." "Eventually," I'd agreed. Meridian Collective exploded during my 26th year. Our sustainable, size-inclusive designs hit a nerve with customers tired of choosing between ethical fashion and affordability. Christina's talent combined with my operational efficiency created something special. We were featured in Vogue's New Designers to Watch section. Revenue hit 7 figures. I still showed up at family dinners in my Meridian boutique work shirt, letting them assume I was folding sweaters for 40 hours a week. The cognitive dissonance was surreal. I'd spend mornings in board meetings discussing expansion strategies and afternoons listening to Dad explain basic budgeting to me like I was financially illiterate. The requests continued escalating. Dad needed help with property taxes, $2, $180 he couldn't cover. Mom wanted a bathroom renovation that cost $4,890. Trevor's kid needed private school tuition assistance, another $5,950. Each time, they presented it as a one-time emergency. "You know we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate," Mom would say, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. I kept paying, kept recording, kept building my company in the shadows of their assumptions. By the time I turned 28, I'd given them over $43,000 in supposed loans, money they'd never mentioned repaying, never acknowledged as the substantial sum it was. The vacation demand came during a particularly successful quarter. We just signed a deal with a major retailer to carry our line in 200 stores nationwide. Christina and I had moved into a proper office space with a small staff. I'd hired Jennifer Wu as my CFO, a brilliant woman who'd previously worked in corporate finance. Dad called on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing Q3 projections with Jennifer. "Hey, Vicky, got a minute?" Mom and I found a perfect cruise to the Bahamas, leaving in 6 weeks. It's $84.70 total. I'd muted the phone, looking at Jennifer across the conference table. She'd raised one eyebrow, having heard enough of my family's stories. "Dad, that's a lot of money to ask for on short notice." "Short notice? We're giving you 6 weeks. That's plenty of time. Besides, it's not like you have major expenses. No house, no car payment. What else are you spending money on?" The casual dismissal of my entire life, the assumption that I had nothing valuable because they couldn't see it, made something crack inside my chest. "I need to think about it," I'd said carefully. "Think about what? Whether you care about your parents' happiness." "Jesus, Victoria, sometimes I wonder how you turned out so selfish. Your brother would help us without hesitation." "Then ask Trevor," I'd suggested quietly. "Trevor has a mortgage and a family to support. You're single, no responsibilities. This should be easy for you." That's when he'd laughed again, that same dismissive sound that cut through me like a blade. "You know what? Forget it. I should have known better than to expect generosity from someone like you." The group text assault began within hours. Mom playing hurt and betrayed. Trevor calling me selfish and ungrateful. Even Amanda chimed in with her opinion about family obligations. They'd built an entire narrative where I was the villain for not immediately agreeing to fund a luxury vacation I hadn't been invited on. I sat in my downtown office that night, the office with my name on the door, overlooking Boston Harbor, and made a decision. Eventually, they needed to see what they'd been blind to. Not because I needed their validation, but because I was tired of carrying their false narrative alongside the truth of my actual success. "I have an idea," Jennifer said the next morning. "Your dad thinks I'm your assistant, right? From that one time he called the office and I answered your phone." I nodded slowly, remembering. 6 months ago, Dad had called my cell while I was in a meeting. Jennifer had grabbed it, saying, "Ms. Hayes is unavailable at the moment." Dad had later made a joke about me having an assistant at my little retail job. "Let's use that," Jennifer continued, her eyes gleaming. "Invite them here. Tell them you want to discuss the vacation request in person. Let them walk into your actual life." The plan crystallized over the following week. I'd invite my parents and Trevor to my office under the pretense of wanting to discuss their request properly and show them financial documents. They'd arrive expecting to see their disappointing daughter in some shabby workspace. Instead, they'd walk into Meridian Collective headquarters. I sent the invitation via email, keeping my tone apologetic and vague. "I'd like to discuss this in person and show you my actual financial situation. Can you come to my office Friday at 2 p.m.? I included the downtown address without additional context. Dad's response came quickly. "Fine, but I don't understand why this needs to be so complicated." Trevor added, "This better not be some dramatic show, Vic. Just write the check or don't." Friday arrived with crystalline clarity. I wore one of Christina's designs, a tailored blazer in sustainable wool over a silk blouse. Professional, powerful, unmistakably expensive. Jennifer dressed similarly in her own impeccable suit. "You ready for this?" Christina asked, stopping by my office. "I've been ready for 3 years," I replied. The receptionist called up at exactly 1:58 p.m. "Ms. Hayes, your 2 o'clock has arrived." "Should I send them up?" "Give them the full tour," I instructed. "Conference room first, then bring them to my office." I watched through my office window as our receptionist, Marcus, guided them through the space. First past the design studio where Christina and 2 junior designers worked on next season's line. Then past the operations area where 6 people managed inventory and logistics. Then through the marketing department. I could see the confusion building on their faces. Dad kept looking around like he'd walked into the wrong building. Mom clutched her purse tighter with each step. Trevor's expression cycled between bewilderment and dawning realization. Marcus brought them to the conference room, where Jennifer was waiting with spreadsheets, financial reports, and a presentation queued up on the large monitor. She stood to greet them with extended hand in perfect corporate posture. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Trevor, welcome. I'm Jennifer Wu, Chief Financial Officer of Meridian Collective. Ms. Hayes will join us in just a moment." Dad shook her hand automatically, still looking confused. His face went from confusion to shock as her words registered. "Wait, your assistant is your..." He couldn't even finish the sentence. "I'm sorry, I think there might be some mistake," he finally managed. "We're here to see our daughter, Victoria." "You're in the right place," Jennifer assured them with a professional smile. "And I was never Ms. Hayes' assistant, Mr. Hayes. That's what you assumed when you called the office 6 months ago. Please, have a seat." They sat slowly, uncertainty clear in their movements. I gave them exactly 60 seconds to stew in their confusion before walking through the conference room door. "Hi, Dad, Mom, Trevor," I said calmly, settling into the chair at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming." Dad stared at me like I'd materialized from another dimension. "Victoria, what is this?" "You wanted to discuss the vacation money," I replied evenly. I thought it was time we had an honest conversation about my actual financial situation. "Your assistant said," Mom started. "Jennifer isn't my assistant," I interrupted gently. "She's my CFO, Chief Financial Officer. She manages the finances for my company. Jennifer, would you mind walking them through the materials?" Jennifer clicked the remote, and the monitor came to life with our company logo. Mom gasped softly. That's your company? The Meridian Collective I've seen at Nordstrom." "Yes, Mrs. Hayes," Jennifer confirmed before continuing. "Meridian Collective was founded 3 years ago by Victoria Hayes and Christina Park. We specialize in sustainable, size-inclusive fashion at accessible price points." She clicked to the next slide, showing our revenue trajectory. Year 1, we did $380,000 in revenue. Year 2, $2.1 million. This year, we're on track for $8.7 million with projected growth to $15 million next year, following our recent retail partnership with Nordstrom. Trevor's mouth had literally fallen open. "This can't be real," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're making this up somehow." Mom made a small sound somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Dad just stared at the screen like the numbers were written in a foreign language, his face cycling through shades of red and white. "The company currently employs 17 people full-time," Jennifer continued, clicking through slides showing our office space, our design team, our operations. "Victoria serves as CEO and handles all strategic partnerships, business development, and operational oversight." She paused, letting the information sink in. "As of this quarter, the company is valued at approximately $12.3 million, based on our last funding round." "12 million," Dad repeated faintly, the words barely audible. 12.3, Jennifer corrected with precision. Victoria owns 60% equity, making her personal stake worth roughly $7.4 million, though of course that's paper value, not liquid assets. I watched their faces as reality settled in. Dad's expression moved through shock, confusion, and something that looked uncomfortably like anger, and underneath it all, I could see the ghost of his earlier dismissive laughter haunting him. The man who'd laughed at me 3 days ago for hesitating sat frozen, unable to process the disconnect between his assumptions and reality. Mom's eyes had gone glassy, tears forming. Trevor looked like someone had physically struck him, his earlier cocky certainty completely shattered. "I don't understand," Mom whispered. "You work at Meridian Boutique. You fold clothes." "I worked there 7 years ago," I corrected gently. "I learned the business there, met Christina there, built relationships there. It was my education. I left 5 years ago to focus full-time on building this company." 5 years, Dad said slowly, his voice taking on an edge as he found his footing in familiar anger. "You've been lying to us for 5 years." "I've been building a company," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You never asked what I was actually doing. You made assumptions and I didn't correct them." "Why?" Trevor found his voice, though it came out rough. "Why would you hide this?" Jennifer cleared her throat, clicking to another slide. This one showed a different spreadsheet, my personal one, titled Family Loans. "Ms. Hayes provided me with records of financial assistance she's given to family members," Jennifer said, her tone professionally neutral but her words landing like precision strikes. "Since 2020, she's given a total of $43,620 in what were labeled as loans, though no formal repayment plans were established." She read through the list methodically. June 2020, $1,500 for car repairs. September 2020, $2,890 for dental work. December 2020, $9,750 for house down payment assistance. March 2021, $2,180 for property taxes. July 2021, $4,890 for bathroom renovation. November 2021, $5,950 for private school tuition. With each item, Dad's face grew redder. Mom had started crying silently. Trevor was staring at his hands, his jaw working like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. "The vacation you requested," I said quietly, "would have brought the total to $52,090 over 3 years. That's money I earned not from folding sweaters, but from building this company from the ground up while you all treated my work like a hobby I'd outgrow." "We didn't know," Mom said, her voice breaking. "You didn't ask," I corrected, though not unkindly. Every time I tried to talk about my work, Dad would cut me off to talk about Trevor's insurance achievements. "You weren't interested in what I was actually doing because you'd already decided what my story was." Dad found his anger, latching onto it. "So this is what? Some kind of revenge? Making us look stupid? You set this whole thing up. Let me laugh at you just so you could humiliate me later." "No," I said firmly, meeting his eyes. "This is me setting a boundary I should have established years ago. You laughed at me 3 days ago when I hesitated to fund your cruise. You called me selfish. Now you see what that selfish retail clerk actually built while you dismissed everything I did." I pulled out a folder, sliding copies across the table. "These are the documented loans. $43,620 that you've never mentioned repaying. Not once. Because you didn't see them as loans, you saw them as your right to my resources. We would have paid you back if we'd known you needed it, Trevor said weakly. I didn't need it, I replied. That's not the point. The point is that you took and took, never asking where it came from, never considering that I might have my own financial goals. You just assumed I existed to solve your problems. Jennifer clicked to the final slide. Moving forward, Ms. Hayes would like to establish clear boundaries regarding financial assistance to family members. I took over, my voice steady. I'm not asking for repayment of previous amounts. Consider them gifts. But I won't be providing additional financial assistance moving forward. Not for vacations. Not for emergencies. Not for anything. The silence was suffocating. Dad pushed back from the table abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. This is bullshit, he said, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. You ambush us here, humiliate us with all these numbers, just to tell us you won't help your own family? You really set us up, didn't you? I've been helping, I said quietly. 4 years, while you called me disappointing. That's what ends today. Mom was crying harder now. How could you keep something like this from us? We're your parents. And you raised me to value honesty, hard work, and self-reliance, I replied. I built this company working 80-hour weeks while you assumed I was wasting my life. I kept it private because every achievement got diminished or credited to Trevor somehow. This was mine. Trevor stood up suddenly, his face flushed. You know what? I think this is really petty. So you have some successful fashion company. Congratulations. That doesn't mean you have to cut your family off. I'm not cutting you off, I said, remaining seated and calm, which seemed to infuriate him more. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. You can have a relationship with me that isn't based on my wallet. Healthy, Dad spat, finding his voice again. This is vindictive. My daughter, $12 million. He shook his head in disbelief, the words barely coherent. My daughter who I thought. Jesus Christ. My company isn't little, I said firmly, steel entering my voice for the first time. It employs 17 people who depend on my leadership. It's changing an industry, and you still can't acknowledge it without diminishing it. Even now, you're making this about your wounded pride rather than what I've actually accomplished. I stood up, gathering my materials. Jennifer will see you out. I have a 3:00 meeting with a potential investor. Victoria, wait, Mom said desperately, reaching toward me. We need to talk about this more. We can't just leave things like this. We can, I replied, not unkindly. You're welcome to have a relationship with me that isn't about money. My door is open for that. But the ATM is permanently closed. I walked out of the conference room, leaving them with Jennifer and the weight of their own miscalculations. I closed my office door and leaned against it, my hands finally shaking now that the confrontation was over. Christina appeared moments later, having watched the entire scene unfold from the design studio. You okay? She asked, studying my face. I think so, I said slowly. That was harder than I expected. You did great, she assured me. They needed to see reality. That wasn't cruel, it was necessary. The aftermath began within hours. My phone exploded with messages before I even left the office. Dad sent a long text about betrayal and family loyalty, somehow making himself the victim. Mom sent tearful voice messages about how hurt she was. Trevor sent increasingly angry texts calling me a show-off. By Saturday morning, I had 73 unread messages, all variations on the same themes. Anger at my deception, hurt that I'd embarrassed them, demands that I apologize, and surprisingly, renewed requests for money now that they knew I could afford it. The most telling message came from Trevor at 2:47 a.m. You think you're so much better than everyone now. Dad was right about you. You're selfish, and you always have been. You really set us up, didn't you? Let Dad laugh at you just so you could humiliate him later. That's cold, Vic. All that money, and you won't even help your own brother. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded them all to Rachel. Her reply came immediately. Not one message congratulating you. Not one acknowledging what you built. Just anger that the ATM revealed it had thoughts and feelings. She was right. In 73 messages, not one had said congratulations, or were proud of you. They were exclusively focused on their own wounded feelings and their lost access to my money. The next week brought escalation. Dad showed up at my office building Tuesday morning, demanding to see me. Marcus called up, uncertainty in his voice. "Ms. Hayes, there's a Douglas Hayes here. He's quite insistent. Tell him I'm in meetings all day," I replied calmly. "And Marcus, if he becomes disruptive, call building security." He left, but not before leaving a handwritten note with Marcus. "You've changed, Victoria. Money has made you cold and arrogant. Your mother is devastated. I hope you're proud of yourself." Mom tried a different approach, showing up at my apartment Wednesday evening. My doorman, Thomas, called up. "Ms. Hayes, your mother is here. She seems quite upset." "Thank you, Thomas. Please tell her I'm not available. She's saying it's an emergency." "It's not," I assured him. Thursday brought a message from Amanda. "Victoria, I don't know what happened, but Trevor is really hurting. Can't you just talk to him? Whatever this fight is about, it's not worth destroying your family." I sat with that message before responding. "Amanda, I appreciate you reaching out. Trevor is welcome to have a relationship with me that isn't based on financial transactions. But that requires seeing me as a person, not a resource." The messages slowed after that, though they never completely stopped. Dad sent periodic texts about disappointment. Mom sent photos of herself looking sad with captions like, "Missing my daughter." Trevor oscillated between angry accusations and awkward attempts at reconciliation that always somehow circled back to money. Meridian Collective continued thriving. We launched our fall collection to incredible reviews. Revenue projections were tracking, even higher than anticipated. I hired 3 more employees and started planning for our first physical retail location. 6 months after the office confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Trevor with the subject line, "I'm sorry." The message was longer and more honest than I had thought him capable of. He acknowledged that he'd treated my success with jealousy rather than pride. He admitted he'd relied too heavily on my financial help while simultaneously looking down on my career. He said he'd been in therapy working through why his sister's success felt threatening. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately," he wrote, "and I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I'm starting to understand. I'm sorry it took me this long." I read the email 3 times before responding. "Thank you for this. It means more than you realize. If you want to grab coffee sometime and just talk, as siblings rather than roles we've been playing, I'd like that." We met 2 weeks later at a neutral cafe downtown. It was awkward initially, both of us uncertain how to interact without the old scripts. But slowly, carefully, we began building something new. Not the relationship we'd had, but something more honest. "Dad's still pretty angry," Trevor admitted over his second coffee. "He feels betrayed. And honestly, the way you set that whole thing up, letting him laugh at you, then revealing everything, he thinks that was calculated revenge." "It wasn't revenge," I said quietly. "It was clarity. I needed him to see the disconnect between his assumptions and reality. Maybe the timing was dramatic, but the truth needed to be this visible." Trevor nodded slowly. "Mom asks about you constantly, but doesn't know how to reach out." "My door isn't locked," I said simply. "But I won't pretend the last 7 years didn't happen just to make her comfortable. For what it's worth," Trevor continued, "I looked up your company. Really looked at it. What you built is impressive, Vic. I should have said that 6 months ago instead of calling you petty." Those words meant more than he could know. My relationship with my parents remains complicated and distant. Mom sends occasional texts about weather and holidays, carefully avoiding anything substantial. Dad and I haven't spoken since the confrontation. He's made it clear through others that until I apologize for embarrassing him, for setting him up to laugh at me, he has no interest in contact. I haven't apologized. I won't. What I've learned is that some people are genuinely incapable of celebrating your success if it contradicts the narrative they've built about you. My father needed me to be the disappointing daughter to make sense of his own choices. My success disrupted that story, and rather than adjust his perspective, he chose to reject reality and reframe everything as my vindictive setup. I sleep peacefully now in a way I never did when I was hiding my achievements and funding their lifestyle. My company continues growing, my team continues thriving, and I've built genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. Last month, I ran into my parents at a charity gala that Meridian Collective was sponsoring. We were one of the primary donors, our name displayed prominently throughout the venue. Mom looked older somehow, smaller. Dad's face went red when he saw me across the room, clearly successful and unbothered by his continued disapproval, and I could almost hear that dismissive laugh echoing between us, a ghost of his own misjudgment. They left early. I stayed and networked, connecting with other business owners and potential partners. That night, I received a text from Mom, "You looked beautiful tonight. I wish things were different between us." I responded simply, "They can be. The door is open whenever you're ready to see me as I actually am, not as you wish I'd been." She hasn't responded yet. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. Either way, I've built a life I'm proud of, surrounded by people who celebrate my success rather than resent it. I've learned that sometimes the family you choose, the Christinas and Jennifers and Rachels who believed in you from the beginning, matters more than the family you were born into. And I've learned that the most valuable thing you can do is refuse to make yourself smaller to fit someone else's limited expectations, even if that someone is your own parent. Even if they laugh at you for it. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with family members who treated you like a resource rather than a person? How did you find the courage to stop funding someone else's life while they dismissed yours? Drop a comment below sharing your story. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the first step toward healing. And if this resonated with you, hit subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and refusing to apologize for it.